But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Let's begin it.
Number ZZ9 plural Z alpha. Number ZZ9. I said I've never seen such hideousness in all my life.
Listen to all this,
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with Buddy.
But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Let's begin it.
Number ZZ9 plural Z alpha. Number ZZ9. I said I've never seen such hideousness in all my life.
Listen to all this,
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with Buddy.
But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Number ZZ9 plural Z alpha. Number ZZ9.
I said I've never seen such hideousness in all my life.
That's Lord, they say.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with Buddy.
But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Let's be at it.
Gonna do it like we did it last summer.
There we go.
Grabbing around the laptop.
Oh my gosh. Well, everything has to go wrong before the beginning of the show, right? Now my Discord messed up, and the weirdest thing fixed it. I switched out of my headphone and then back to my headphones so that you could hear me, because otherwise Discord didn't know that I had my headphones. So kind of my headset, really. Kind of a weird thing. Anyway, hello and welcome to Technical Difficulties with the Badgers and HBR Talk 319. Hashtag listen to women. Which ones? I am your host, Hannah Wallen, here with the personification of perceptivity, Mike Stevenson, and nonsense annihilator, Lauren Brooks. And, feminists, we're still in your declarations touching your rage and resentments. And equality not detected. So, we have gone through the Declaration of Sentiments, and there was no true feminism found. So I don't know, I guess you can't call the suffragettes the first feminists anymore, because according to true feminists, who say that true feminism is about equality, the suffragettes weren't feminists. But we'll continue reading about them and their work and their fight with the evil patriarchal women who didn't want to vote. So about that time, the women had to fight to convince women that women wanted voting rights. But before we get into that, we got to do what we got to do. So as always, Honey Badger Radio dishes out a smorgasbord of thought-provoking discussions, and as experiences both recent and long past have demonstrated, the provoked thoughts are fighting back. They've made it clear that for people like us, relying on third-party payment platforms like Patreon to fund our work is treading on thin ice, or building our house in the path of a rapidly growing wildfire. In light of this, we strongly encourage our supporters to switch at least their support for us to feedthebadger.com, the most stable way to help us out. And if you want to tip us directly, instead of relying on any social media platform's tip jar, The link for that is feedthebadger.com/justthetip. And as always, the same risk applies to our social media platforms, which is why you should further provoke the thought police by tracking our thought-provoking discussions on honeybadgerbrigade.com, where you can find your way to all of our content, as well as a link to feedthebadger.com in the drop-down menu at the top of the page. And again, honeybadgerbrigade.com is going to be a little sporadic for the next few days. We've still had some problems with it, and we're going to have to basically reset the whole thing, reboot the whole thing. But I'm going through and checking to see what's not already archived. There are web crawl archives on archive.org from our blog going all the way back to the beginning, but I don't know how much has been caught. I looked and just the front page has like 400, so it may all be on there. But just to be sure, I'm going to go through and do a shitload of work before we do that, and then there should be no problems with the blog after that, and we'll have a whole set of archives. So I guess if somebody was trying to take it down by messing with it, yeah, you screwed up, because now it's going to be more permanent than it was before. So with that, don't fuck with the Badgers. With that, though, let's get into our fight between women, our chick fight from the early 20th century. Last week we were looking at the petition on this page here, and I was having a terrible time reading it because the print is poor, it's not well focused, the image size is bad, so I looked it up somewhere else, and we have a better copy right here. So here is what the first petition against, by the way, not for, against women's suffrage says. And I'm going to have to scroll back and forth because this doesn't seem to be getting any bigger. So this is from the Women Voters Anti-Suffrage Party of New York to the United States Senate. It's an interesting name. The Women Voters Anti-Suffrage Party of New York. And a reminder, because we looked at this before, they vastly outnumbered the suffragettes at this point. There were hundreds of thousands of anti-suffragettes and barely any suffragettes. So they said, whereas this country is now engaged in the greatest war in history, whereas the advocates of the federal amendment, through urging it as a war measure, announce through their president, Mrs. Catt, that its passage means a simultaneous campaign in 48 states, it demands organization in every precinct, activity, agitation, education in every corner. Nothing less than this nationwide, vigilant, unceasing campaign will win ratification. Therefore, be it resolved that our country, in this hour of peril, should be spared the harassing of its public men and the distracting of its people from work for the war, and further resolved that the United States be respectfully urged to pass no measure involving such a radical change in our government, while the attention of the patriotic portion of the American people is concentrated on the all-important task of winning the war, and during the absence of over 1 million men abroad. So, what they pointed out here is pretty significant, in my opinion. Right? The suffragettes were some sneaky bitches. What they basically did when they started their campaign was try to sneak the idea through when most of the existing voters, right, most of the people who were going to be affected by this, because if you increase the number of voters, you decrease the weight of each vote. And I think if you don't understand why, you're not good at math. But Yeah, they tried to sneak it through while most of them were gone, or where well, a large chunk of them, a very large chunk of them were gone, and many of them never came back. Right? Oh, well, you guys are gone. We're just gonna devalue your votes. Sneaky bitches. So this was and the suffragette anti-suffragettes grew too, by the way. Now the suffragette movement did also grow, and I'll show that here in a minute. But the last thing we read, the antis, as they were called, testified before legislatures, published articles in newsletters, held public meetings, and eventually debated the suffragists. In 1870, a group of distinguished women collected 15,000 signatures to urge Congress not to give women the vote. 15,000 women signed a petition to not get voting rights back in the early 20th century, back in 1915. So while all those women were saying that they spoke for all women, 15,000 women said no. And those were just the women who were activists before the issue got contentious. Many other
when have you ever known a woman to take no for an answer, Hannah?
Even from another woman. No, yes. They don't, do they? Oh my gosh.
For one.
So many other petitions followed, and by 1915, actually this was in 1870, so this was in the late 19th century that they sent the 15,000 signatures. So by 1915, hundreds of thousands of women had joined the anti-movement. So the number of organized suffragists grew over time, but just a few years after the original organization of the suffragists, they outnumbered the suffragists in just New York. The nationwide suffragist movement was 13,000. The New York anti-suffragist movement was 20,000. And that doesn't count women all over the country, right? By 1905, they had only grown to 17,000 suffragettes. By 1910, they had only grown to 75,000. You had 105,000 in 1912 opposing them. There was double the number opposing them. Number of suffragists were doubled by the number of anti-suffragists at 200,000 to 100,000 in 1915. And it wasn't until 1917 that the number of suffragists grew significantly to 2 million. They bragged 2 million. And then they finally outnumbered the anti-suffragists. So it took the suffragettes and the suffragists for women, it took them that many years, right? 1893 to 1910, it took them 17 years just to get to 75,000, and they were still outnumbered. And it took them almost it took them almost 27 years. It took them 25 years to get to 2 million. Whereas the female anti-suffragists, the number of female anti-suffragists grew smaller, but started out much larger. And it was just the last 4 years. 72-year campaign total, right, that the suffragists had. And it only in the last 4 years did they outnumber the anti-suffragists. So it really took them all that time.
And it kind of goes to show you how dangerous minorities can be.
Yeah.
Now, I know that sounds like a charged phrase in ways it needn't be, but yeah, the suffragettes were very much a minority, just like many people who committed atrocities over the centuries and indeed the millennia.
No.
Started off as a minority. It's perfectly possible for hideous ideas to start off in minorities. In fact, they generally do, because there is some consistency to human nature. People aren't drawn towards things that destroy society. If they were, we never would have evolved to the point where we could develop society. But yeah, the suffragettes are a good example of an idea that a very few amount of people had, and so no one else thought anything of it. But got to 100 years later,
Yeah.
you'll see the minority thought, namely that men oppress women and always have forever, has become a majority thought. Like it's actually kind of difficult to find anyone out there in society who doesn't believe the nonsense that was sown into society by the likes of the suffragettes. This conspiracy theory that men oppress women everywhere and always have.
Well, what's interesting is it's still a minority of the female population that calls themselves feminists, right? And it's still a minority of the population that accuses men of being the reason that women might need to call themselves feminists, which, women don't really need to call themselves feminists. They don't need feminism at all. There isn't actually any benefit to women from feminism at all. There is a benefit to liars from feminism, and there's a benefit to con artists from feminism, because it's a great way to exploit gynocentrism to push things through that you wouldn't ordinarily be able to convince people to accept. Right? If you haven't noticed, Western society has a phenomenon wherein people will allow their boundaries, their personal boundaries, to be violated, in particular in relation to their human rights and their civil rights, if the person pushing those boundaries makes it look like defending them is an exercise of some form of wrongful prejudice, and in particular, wrongful prejudice against women. So, if you don't give up this human right or that civil right, this privacy, that ability to do normal things, this space that is just yours, this property that you worked for, this wealth that you worked for, right? This definition of your personality based on your own actions and your own attitudes, then you hate women. So therefore you have to give all that up. And there are many people who will. Many people will bend the knee and say, "Oh, I'm so sorry. No, I don't hate women. Yes, you can take my money. Yes, you can take my reputation. Yes, you can take my freedom." Because they're so protective of women. And that is really how feminism has been successful over the last 200 years. Right? And about 200 years ago, feminists started trying to convince the greater female population that men abused them just by existing, just by creating civilization as it is, and just by being bigger and stronger and more capable in terms of dealing with physical hardships and building things, and more interested in creating intricate mechanical devices and so on. Right? Just by being that group of people, somehow men oppressed women. And that's the story that's been going on for 200 years. Right? And I don't think most people do believe it. I think a lot of people will say, "Oh yeah, women were oppressed," but they don't want to blame men. And they don't call themselves feminists because they don't want to blame men. But the reality is women were not oppressed. women had restrictions, women had obligations, men had restrictions, men had obligations. Men and women had rights. Both sexes had rights. Both sexes had expectations from the other sex and of the other sex. And both sexes had their roles. And they were cooperative roles. What feminists did was they took the female side of that, and they took the hardships that were associated with just the female side of that, and said, well, only these are bad, and only these need to change. But we want to keep all of the male obligation to women. We want to keep all of the male requirement to support women, and the male requirement to protect women. But we want to get rid of all the things that women have to do to make that possible for men to do without suffering undue hardship themselves. And they did. And that's why we have such a massive homeless problem today among men who are divorced. That's why we have such a massive suicide problem today among men who are divorced. So, yeah. I don't know. I wouldn't say that most people have adopted wholesale feminist viewpoints. But they do fall for the feminist narrative that women faced a lot of discrimination uniquely, and that women were uniquely oppressed, when in fact they were not. So the writer goes on, most textbooks overlook or lightly dismiss the National Association Opposed to Women's Suffrage, founded in the Park Avenue home of Josephine, Mrs. Arthur M. Dodge of New York. And this is something, again, I will point out. She probably, her public name was probably Mrs. Arthur M. Dodge, not Josephine Dodge. Because when women acted toward the state or toward the public, they acted in the name of their husband. Right? So when feminists tell you that women were unpersoned under the state, they're mischaracterizing the state designation of the family unit. It's basically when men acted in the public sphere, they were acting in the name of their whole family. And so when women acted in the public sphere, they affiliated themselves with their whole family by acting in their husband's name. And that means that while a man could only destroy his own reputation, and people would feel sorry for his wife if he did that, a woman could destroy her husband's reputation, and it would be his fault. So he goes on, Dodge was a public-spirited and indomitable woman whose father, Marshall Jewell, had been the Republican governor of Connecticut and a supporter of women's rights. Mrs. Dodge knew something about politics. She had skipped her 4th year at Vassar to live in St. Petersburg when her father became envoy to Russia, and she and her sister became minor celebrities at the Russian court due to their figure skating abilities. I'm going to try making this slightly larger because I'm a little more blind than usual today. Maybe I can here. There we go. It's allergies. This is a fun little tidbit for people who don't have allergies. If they're really bad, you get a mucus glare over your eye, and it makes it hard to see things. So everything's a little bit blurry. Till the allergy medicine works, but that's going to take another half hour or so. Mrs. Dodge was a pioneer in providing daycare to help working mothers, and she was president of the New York State. Now wait a minute, I thought before women had the vote, women couldn't work. Didn't feminists tell us that there were no women with jobs? Why would they need daycare?
They sure did. Why
Oh,
would they need daycare indeed?
Oops. Lauren, can you get closer to the microphone?
Oh, sorry. Yes, can't get up that.
But what was it you said again?
Yeah, no, I said that's exactly right. If they couldn't go anywhere, then why in the world would they need daycare?
Yeah. And if they weren't working, why would there be working mothers needing daycare? Mm-hmm. Something doesn't add up here, right? Providing daycare to help working mothers. Back in the early 20th century, I thought that didn't happen until Obama. Like, working mothers didn't get daycare until Obama. We were told that there was no daycare for working mothers during the 2008 campaign. These people lied to me. I am shocked. I can't. The California. Oh, okay. I can't stop laughing at that. Oh, this stuff, every time we read through an historical document, it debunks shit that we've heard in the last 2 or 3 Democrat campaigns about women. And she was president of the New York Antis in 1911 when California became the 6th state to give the vote to women. So these women were not anti-feminist. Getting daycare to help working mothers seems like something that the feminists have been pushing for, right? They are the ones that want free daycare for working mothers. She was fighting for that. She was still a privileged lady. She went to an expensive school. She took time off from an expensive school for a foreign trip with her diplomat father. So, like, this is not ignorant country bumpkins like people like me have been called for years. This isn't somebody that doesn't know what she's dealing with and what she's talking about. This is somebody who is on par with the women that she's fighting with for this. Mrs. Dodge was a oh, I read that. When she was president of the New York Antis in 1911, when California became the 6th state to give the vote to women. The California victory alarmed Dodge and her allies, motivating them to form the National Association opposed to women's suffrage just 6 weeks later. From 1912, to 1918, when the swine flu that we got reminded of through the COVID crisis hit. Right, we got told all about that 1918 flu and the masks that they wore back then and everything, right? So from 1912 to 1918, Dodge's newsletter, The Woman's Protest Against Women's Suffrage, promoted her view that women had more power to improve society without the vote than with it. The organization's all-female membership totaled 105,000 in its first year and peaked at about 500,000 in 1919. So that view, women have more power to improve society without the vote than with it. Kind of have to think about what that means. Because if you look back at women's activism before women's suffrage, a lot of it was women getting involved in initiatives physically, where they would go investigate. For instance, the woman, I can't think of her name off the top of my head, but the woman who initially worked to improve women's prison systems in the United States, went to the prisons, spoke to the women, spoke to the people that worked there, was there to see what it was like, and then went to legislators and said, these things have to change. This is what's happening to the prisoners. They can't be rehabilitated under these conditions. And she got changes made. And she didn't sit in her house and wait around for an election and then vote for people that promised to do something about the problem. And that's something that's changed with women. Right? Women will march in the street because they're mad that some guy made a statement that reveals the fact that rich men know when women are gold diggers and clout chasers. But they won't so frequently step out of their homes, and out of their comfortable lives, out of their work schedules and their all the different things they've talked their kids into getting involved in, dance classes and karate and I don't know, soccer and everything else that parents inflict on their kids. But they won't step out of all of that and go do the legwork in large numbers like they did 200 years ago and 100 years ago, because they're too busy trying to do everything else. And they're too tired. And then they turn around and expect to vote for politicians who don't know what's going on or don't care. And a lot of times, people got mad at Kamala Harris for not going to the border to find out what was going on at the border in order to make decisions about it. But that's pretty much standard in D.C. I used to make a joke about corporate entities that the policy that you have to deal with as a worker in the lowest common denominator outlet. Like if you're working for a chain of convenience stores and you're the one who works at the gas station convenience store, all of the policy that you have to deal with feels like it's made from a room full of chimpanzees on acid being given paper and crayons, and whatever they draw, they pick from that to make policy using the dartboard method, right? Congress is like that. I swear, you never hear or see your congressman. They don't show up and investigate things. They don't go places and talk to people and consider what's going on in the lives of their constituents. They look at numbers. They look at news reports. They look at what other congressmen are saying. And unless there's an activist group or a set of lobbyists who approach them, they don't know it. They don't know anything. If you don't write to them, they don't know anything. They might not answer all of our letters. Like, nobody answered my letters about the definition of rape in Ohio. But, nobody answered my letters about the fact that pedophiles in Ohio can get custody of children that they conceive through rape either. And that law changed. That they actually put through a statute that outlawed that. So when I suggested people write to them and everything, they must have gotten enough letters and enough contact from people outraged about the existing situation that they realized something needed to be done. But they don't know that stuff unless people approach them with it. And that used to be something that women did. It used to be that women would, even if they didn't directly travel to D.C. or travel to their state capitals and speak directly to their politicians, they would write letters, they would pass around pamphlets to other people who would write letters. They would write to newspapers where their words would be seen by large groups of people, all the readership, and get the Overton window moving, get the what's acceptable in society changing, get people talking about the issue, get the issue on the table, and then the next thing you know, lawmakers would start addressing it, right? And yeah, that law is not gendered. It is illegal for the perpetrator of a sexual assault in Ohio. I thought it said rape in the law, but it says sexual assault. It is illegal for the perpetrator of a sexual assault to retain custody or gain custody of a child conceived by that sexual assault. So, in fact, if the perpetrator and the victim are both adults, the perpetrator still cannot have custody of that child. So they went a whole hog on it. So that was good. Jen Bottle says Congress is not lazy. Why, just yesterday they did 58 squat sets. Yeah. One each, right? But the point is, like, and it's, I don't know that I would necessarily call it all laziness. I mean, there's a lot that goes on in the United States. So the federal congressmen, they're not going to know if you don't contact them. But there is a degree to which, you know, they could investigate, they could find out more than they do. And they really spend all their time dealing with lobbyists and each other, the news media, you know, stuff like that. So they don't hear or learn about much of anything unless it becomes part of popular discussion or you write to them and alert them of it. So, just a point to make here. When she says that women had more power to improve society without the vote than with it, you know, women worked harder to improve society when they couldn't just rely on voting for somebody who promised to do it. And before we move on, I have 2 super chows that came in, one on the 22nd and one today, but at 2:57 a.m. we had Money is Honey for the Badger gave us $5 and said, the money for the future of the autismo women. And then we have Machine 1318 who gave us $40 but didn't say anything. So if you're listening, Machine 1318, hopefully there wasn't a comment that didn't make it through. But thanks you guys for those super chows. And I want to get those out of the way before we get more into the show, because they're not necessarily specific to what's being discussed. Pepina pointed out, women got their vote in through their husbands. Those were the times. And that's another thing. Your vote as a man represented your whole family. You were the household voter. And it wasn't something that you just did. It was something that was a family decision. Right? Maybe if your kids were 5, they didn't say anything about it. But you had to consider how it was going to affect them. You had to consider how it was going to affect your wife. And you had to consider how it was going to affect your property, your earnings, and your future ability to stay out of war. And yeah, women vote by proxy. Proxy was the saying, like Jen Bottle says. So, in addition to the power that they had, right, to influence what was talked about, what legislators were considering, you know, what the president ran on, they were also influencing the voters in their homes. So the organization grew super fast. In comparison, really, to the anti-suffragists. Suffrage organizations had smaller membership, finally pulling ahead of the antis, with about 2 million voters, or 2 million members in 1917. Still only about 1/14 of potential women voters. So they were still a minority among women. Even when they got to 2 million, even when they got to where they outnumbered the women who were actively fighting against them, they didn't outnumber the women who didn't sign on to be on board with them. In 1914, 66 years after Seneca Falls. So for 66 years, these women pushed and pushed and nagged and bitched and whined and moaned. And 66 years, they finally started addressing the fact that most women don't want the vote. Anna Howard Shaw addressed the common objection that the majority of women do not want the vote. Her response was that suffragists should not even reply to such arguments because they have no bearing on our question. So what did she just say there? You think about this.
It doesn't matter if anyone disagrees with us. We will kill them.
Yeah.
It's a mentality we've found ourselves face to face with in the last couple of weeks.
Yep. She basically said it doesn't matter if women don't want what we're doing in women's name. It doesn't matter if we don't speak for all women. We're demanding this, and women had better get out of our way because we're doing this for women. That was their attitude. It's the same thing I saw. Was it Jessica Valenti? I think it was Jessica Valenti. Went on vacation. She's the one that had the I bathe in male tears sweatshirt on at the beach. She was a journalist. I don't know if she's even still working as a journalist. But during the heyday of hashtag Women Against Feminism, she went on this vacation with her husband to the beach and tweeted out from her vacation that even if the majority of women disagree with feminists, it's okay. They'll act on our behalf anyway. And I was just like, you're not making yourselves look good. You're not defending yourselves with that statement. You're basically saying that our consent doesn't matter. Feminists do not care about your consent. They only care about how they can manipulate the consent narrative to make you a bad guy. When they need to get consent, they determine that it is irrelevant. Statements like Shaw's gave ammunition to the anti-suffragists. How could giving women the vote be an advance in democracy, they asked, when the majority of women were either opposed to suffrage or indifferent? In an effort to put women's lack of support in the best light possible, suffragists frequently echoed the antis' arguments. The majority of women, they claimed, were either pro-suffrage or indifferent. The fact that many women were indifferent allowed both sides to make exaggerated claims of female support. So let's compare that to the discussion of consent again, right? If a woman is indifferent, is that allowed to be considered consent during a sex act? Right? If she's like, whatever, you just do what you want, and doesn't seem enthusiastic, haven't feminists said that consent isn't given if it's not enthusiastic? But here they're saying, and have said for a couple hundred years, that it doesn't matter if it's not enthusiastic. In fact, it doesn't matter if it's not really consent. As long as it's not a refusal, they can go ahead and do what they want to women.
Even if it is a refusal, they're going to go ahead and do it anyway.
Yeah. Just because you don't want this.
As soon as the minority grows big enough to outnumber the majority, they're going to flip from there. The minority matters to now we're the majority, and now we matter more than the minority. It's awfully curious how that works.
Yeah. And the whole time, your consent doesn't matter to them. It never matters to them. Historians sometimes take suffragists' claims at face value, stating, for example, that suffrage came to be seen as a goal around which all women could unite. It is unfortunate that few reliable opinion polls are available, but there is considerable evidence that suffrage was never supported by a majority of American women, let alone all women. College textbooks sometimes portray the suffrage campaign as a battle of the sexes. The American Promise says that men's dominance over women knit all white men together politically, while Alan Brinkley's American History, a Survey, says that the anti-movement was dominated by men. America, a Narrative History says that Anthony made little impression on the defenders of masculine prerogative, and America, Empire of Liberty adds that many men and some women opposed suffrage. It's interesting how they do that. Many men and some women. So a few hundred men might be many men, but hundreds of thousands of women are only some women.
And I have to wonder how many women were among the suffragists as opposed to suffragettes, who were trying to express the opinion that, yet not only do we not want the vote, we don't want any such thing as a vote. It sounds outlandish nowadays. Now that we're all surrounded by this, we have to save democracy narrative, as though democracy is synonymous with the human race itself. Like we can't possibly exist without democracy. And there's a scant handful of people saying, do you know, you say we're destroying democracy and we're not. That's just a narrative you have. But at the same time, we're trying to imagine a world that can thrive without democracy, and it's not that difficult because democracy isn't that old as a concept, and I imagine what few based women there were in the early 20th century. I guess there were very few based people, or maybe most people were based back in those days. It doesn't really matter because I haven't defined based. But to return to my initial point, there must have been some people in the early days of democracy, or in the middle days of democracy, I guess it was at that point, who were still saying, yeah, democracy is actually bullshit. We don't want to save it. We were kind of much better off when we had a monarch who had skin in the game, a monarch who could not be bought off. We were actually doing quite well in those days. We're not particularly interested in rule by the people because the people are retarded.
There were people that pushed to make George Washington America's first king.
Based.
Yeah, they wanted a monarchy here. So there was debate over it, and the representative republic idea, the parliamentary system, kind of won out with the idea that we're going to do it right this time, and it only worked as long as men remained invested in maintaining as much of their own independence as possible and maintaining the small size of the American government. And as soon as they started relying on the government for more and more personal things, more and more small community things, that became the start of the downfall of the United States. As soon as we started seeing, well, you know, this problem is a little more widespread than just my house. The federal government should do something about it. This problem is big. The federal government should do something about it. As opposed to, we, the citizens, should band together and get it figured out. We, the citizens, can work together and do something about this. That pretty much destroyed the strength of the country, little by little, over a couple hundred years. And unfortunately, it happened in such an incremental way that many within the population didn't see it happening, didn't understand what they were doing, the damage they were doing, and so they ended up participating in it and facilitating it and ignoring and even making fun of the people that were shouting warnings about this the whole time, going, hey, we're growing this system too big, we're handing too much power over to the state. This was why we had a revolution in the first place, guys. Why are we bringing it here? And now we're to the point where those of us that are fed up with it, that have been saying for the last 30 or more years, just depending on how old you are, that this is the wrong way to go. We're finally getting more into a majority that people are recognizing, oh gosh, we screwed up. We gave the government too much power. Now it seems like it's turned into the blob. We got to do something about this. Well, now it's a much bigger and harder job, and we might not succeed. And if we do succeed, we won't succeed without a whole lot of pain. So, there you go. And one of those increments, one of those steps, one of the big steps was, again, giving women the vote. The mention of some women antis is welcome, as is Brinkley's statement that male antis were supported by many women. Scholars who have written about the women antis generally agree that the organized anti-suffrage campaign was primarily a movement of middle and upper-class white women, that the male antis sometimes joined the campaign at the request of women leaders. Just as women anti-suffragists are often overlooked today, male supporters of suffrage, like Henry S. Blackwell, Thomas Wentworth Higginson, William Lloyd Garrison, Senator A.A. Sargent, and the Reverend Henry Ward Beecher, are barely mentioned, and 5 of 15 textbooks make no mention of male support whatsoever. In fact, male support led the way in the earliest suffrage victories. When lawmakers made Wyoming women the first fully enfranchised women in the world in 1869, the only campaign had been 2 speeches by traveling women suffragists. Similarly, the second victory in Utah Territory 1 year later was apparently achieved without any campaign by women at all. So women didn't do that. Men did. Aware of the strength of male support, suffrage leaders carried out 56 campaigns to let men vote on the suffrage question, while they almost always opposed letting women vote on it. Now, why, if they had the support of women, why would they want men to make that decision? Again, sneaky bitches.
Given that men oppress women always, everywhere, and always have, it's odd of them to rely on men for such an earth-shattering change. Normally, the oppressed are unable to appeal to the oppressors in order to pull this off. I mean, in the French Revolution, they had to invent a machine just so they could cut off all the heads they wanted to cut off. And that was a dispute between the plebs and the royalty and the clergy. But between men and women, in this imaginary fight that the suffragettes and their ilk imagined into existence, it didn't take that long. They said, men, we want power that you don't have. And they went, okay.
Yeah.
and then 100 years of darkness and counting.
Yeah. It's almost like everything that they've said about men's malicious oppression of women was a lie. Right? It's almost like everything they've said about men's attitude toward women at the time was a lie. So you look at the way that they handled this, right? The men that they wanted to vote for this was the men in positions of government authority and power. Men in the bureaucracy, men who felt they would benefit from people who vote for safety nets, right? People who ask the government to do things for them, people who appeal to authority for change, having the vote. But when it was wartime, and the suffragettes really started heavily pushing, they didn't want the men who were being manipulated and imposed on by that authority to vote. They didn't want the men who had real stake in the game. They didn't want the men who had real skin in the game to vote on this. They wanted the men who were left behind. The men who were more likely to appeal to authority with them. Or the men who were in authority. It's kind of like when you're in the first grade and you're in an argument with a classmate, and instead of holding her own in the argument or admitting if she's wrong, she goes and tells the teacher that you're picking on her and gets you in trouble. Or, Twitter. Same place. First grade, Twitter, whatever. So, Utah got women's voting rights through without a single woman campaigning for it. Aware of the strength of male support, suffrage leaders carried out 56 campaigns to let men vote on the suffrage question. So they didn't need women's consent because they could get women overridden by men who were convinced based on the vocal statements, the loudmouth statements from the suffragists that they represented women to do their bidding, right? They could get those men to override all of the other women. And they've been doing that for 200 years. Listen to women? Well, not those women. Listen to us. We speak for them. They may say we don't, but we do. That's the feminist narrative. Proposed referendums for women only. Next headline. So the lone referendum for women only was held in Massachusetts in 1895. Only 4% of eligible women voted. Anti-suffragists had encouraged women to stay away from the polls, and the vast majority of them did. In 57 towns, not a single woman voted for suffrage. Of the few votes that were actually cast, 96% were pro-suffrage. For many years afterwards, suffrage leaders like Julia Ward Howe cited the 96% figure as a victory, but they never again asked for a referendum of women only. So to me, that was a mistake. I think the anti-suffragists should have encouraged women to go to the polls and speak their minds, because they probably would have seen that 96% figure, or possibly even higher, going away from voting rights. Shadowclaw8787 asks if we can see the Twitch chat. So I hope that helps. Yes, we can. It's all going through Restream. Restream is the service that we stream through. So we see all the YouTube chats, the Restream chats. If you say something on Facebook, we see that. Let me see what all it shows me. Yeah, it shows those three. So it won't show. I think this is also going out. This might still be going out on X. I don't know. They just changed it so that. Okay, I think I do know who you are. But yeah, they just changed it so that you have to pay a higher fee to be able to stream on X. They had too many people probably were hosting live streams that were plebs. And of course, my account is still restricted without explanation of any kind. I cannot listen to streams on X, and I cannot participate in them from my account. So that's an interesting development. And I had a thread that I had posted a while back that I went to reference today. Found out the thread, you can see the first tweet if you find the first tweet as a reply, but you can't see the replies that I made to myself to create the thread. The person that I was arguing with got angry and flagged them all as spam. So, because I pointed out that in modern America, not 200 years ago, but in modern America, if you go through various types of infrastructure jobs, dangerous jobs that people rely on for different things, technical jobs that people rely on, even appliance repair people, a tiny percentage of most of those jobs. The biggest one, I think, was maybe 10% of the construction industry is women. And you know that a lot of them are doing things like being the flagger on the road and not operating heavy machinery or handling heavy loads or anything like that. Right? So very few construction workers are women. And you know, in housing construction, you have women who work in housing construction, but then when you find out what they do, it's clerical work. So yeah, there's quite a bit of resentment that goes into when I get reported. It's usually for something like that. You know, I point out that no, women would not do just fine if men vanished. In fact, if men vanished from the world, we would be so fucked. Women, you have no idea how fast things would fall apart. There would be no utilities. There would be no food available. There would be no actually anything that you rely on. There would be no internet because there'd be no electricity. Right? You cannot run the power grid with less than 5% of the workers. Right? There'd be no water.
You know how great it would be if we could get all women off of social media for a fucking day?
Oh my God.
I'm good with that.
But you have to understand, social media is a video game for women, measured in the achievements and you know, wins and prizes are measured in how many clicks, views, likes, retweets, reposts, and so on they get. And when they get into a conflict with somebody or competition with somebody for attention, those are the mobs. And of course, accounts that are verified and large are boss monsters. So, you know, when you see other conservative women attacking, like the conservative women that are in office or that are in positions of power, that are in positions of social power, you know, or just even married to high power politicians, because that happens quite a bit, right? They're going after boss monsters, especially if they're attacking on social media and going for likes and retweets for that. And the same thing is true when they attack, you know, liberal women. But it's a different boss monster when you attack a liberal woman, or really a communist woman, because there aren't any liberal women in the country. There are women who call themselves liberal. There are women who call themselves libertarian. There are a few of them that actually are. But there are no liberal women in the country. And I will say this because when you talk to a woman who says she's liberal, ask her what her main issue is, and the first thing that will come up is usually abortion. So they're not liberal, they're feminist, right? If they start talking about issues that were once considered liberal issues, they will talk about them from a communist perspective. And again, they're not liberal, they're feminist. And feminism is a communist movement, so they are communist. So there are no liberal women.
Liberating children from their mothers is like liberating bodies from souls.
Yeah.
Like as a euphemism for killing someone. As I've often said, we're a tricky species. We can any term can be used to advocate for liberty or to advocate for its foil, for the opposite. Some people call it freedom, and then it's the freedom to imprison people and shit like that. With some people, it's equality, and then it's the equality to prevent people from ever succeeding in life. That's called communism. There's so much of this boils down to people just load a bunch of baggage into a single term, and then they don't have to explain the baggage. They just use the term, and they assume everyone understands what they mean by the term, but they don't. They mean the baggage, and we never get past it because no one ever examines the baggage behind the terms they're using.
Yeah.
Because that's too much effort. It's just so much easier just to say racist or simp or whatever.
Yep. And when it comes to women, they're particularly invested in manipulating that specific phenomenon, right? Because if you get that mental shortcut going, that mental shorthand going, and you can manipulate people based on common beliefs about various labels, and you can use those labels as your weapons in your attack. And by the way, no, they're not fighting the boss monster. They're fighting the boss monster's orbiters, right? So nobody gets into an argument, no pleb gets into an argument on Twitter or Facebook or any other social media site with Kamala Harris or Hillary Clinton or any of the women on the right. Like, you don't see Ann Coulter having a conversation with me, for instance, because they're too big, they're too busy. If they had time for that, they wouldn't have time to do the stuff that they do. Although I still am waiting to figure out exactly what it is that Kamala Harris does, besides laugh a lot. But when she
increases her own power.
Yeah, she does increase her own power.
For 30 years now, she's been getting power and using that power to increase her own power. So that's a leadership quality right there, isn't it?
That's very feminine, actually. But yeah, we don't go after arguments with them. You say something about them and you wait for their orbiters, for their loyalists to start making comments back. And you duke it out with those guys. Those are their weapons. So, and you win simply by making a spectacle of yourself. That's the game. That's how feminists play social media. That's how women play social media. Feminists are better at it than other women, and have been for quite a while, because they will also manipulate the authority end of it, right? So if your opponent gets in a few good licks and you can't counter what they're saying, and the opinion of people reading the conversation might be turning against you, you just report everything that they posted. And I've had that done to me a lot. My account's really compromised by that, actually.
If you had to, here's one of those funny, drunken questions. If you had to put society entirely in the hands of autists or narcissists, what would you go with?
Oh gosh,
I,
no,
I would
no
hope
contest,
nobody would even
autists.
hesitate for a second. You would put it in the hands of autists.
At least,
Um,
at least if you took the autist group, there would be engineers
Yes, exactly. There would be people who can build infrastructures.
and maintain them.
It's kind of, well, it's impossible to put narcissists in charge of a society. Well, it's not impossible, but you won't last a generation, because they can't do it. They'll get caught up in their own ego, and it won't be about the issues. It'll be about the celebrities. When you look around society these days, you kind of get the impression that we're not long into a society that is being led by narcissists. And to be honest, the people who have built society and its infrastructures over the last few millennia, by modern standards, were all autists.
Mm-hmm.
By modern standards, they were all far right. If you asked anyone, for the 199,000 years of human history, any of the questions that you ask people these days, yeah, they would appear on the political compass as hard right. They'd be like, no, these people are giant faggots. Why are you listening to these people? They have no idea how to run a civilization. They only have these ideas because they've been so pampered by hundreds of years of good men made by hard times, I guess, or something like that.
Yeah. Yep, and of course the people that listen to them are equally retarded faggots. Oh my god. I when I get into conversations with these people, I sometimes picture, ever since Brian pointed out that social media is women's video games, like I like regular video games. I kind of latched on to Neverwinter more recently, and I started playing that again just because, like I said, if I don't get access to video games at least sometimes, I become kind of a bitch. So I guess a lot of women are like that when they don't have access to relations, to sex, to being in a relationship with a man. But I don't have that problem. I don't have to worry about that. And I still get bitchy if I don't get my video games. So that one.
I like video games, and I've always liked video games. But the idea of playing online with strangers has always turned me off completely.
It's the easiest way for me to socialize.
Even
I
the
don't
idea
do
of
so
just
well in person.
having a casual game of chess with some complete rando from Slovakia or something. I'd rather play chess against the computer. I don't know what it is about me. I think it might be a masculine thing, bordering on an autistic thing. I would rather play with things than play with people. And yes, that is an autistic thing. That is a man versus women thing. I mean, even male babies are more drawn to things like clocks, and female babies are more drawn to human faces and stuff. And that this continues into childhood and continues longer into adulthood and stuff like this. Men like things, women like people. That doesn't mean men don't like people, and it doesn't mean women don't like things. But yes, there is.
Wait a minute. I don't like people. What does that mean?
That means you're a man.
I like people, but they have to be decent people, right?
Yeah.
That's the problem that I have, is you run into a lot of people that are just assholes.
Assholes, yeah.
And they're not even the good kind of assholes. Like there's a good kind of asshole and a bad kind of asshole.
Look, some things are assholes as well. My computer is a total asshole. It just does its own thing sometimes. And it goes, no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
Like, you can still get pissed off by things. I think this is why people have pets, because they like to yell at cats and dogs, even though they know that cats and dogs don't understand.
See, but I can't even commit to that.
People and things meet, because people like to get shit off their chests in the presence of someone or something that doesn't understand. I recently discovered how fun it is to flip off Lauren's cat. to just give it the finger. There's something really there's a certain release.
Does
in
the cat attack
aggressively
when you
giving
do
the
that?
finger.
Does the cat
Just
attack you when
aggressively
you do
give the
that?
finger. The cat doesn't care. The cat just stares at you. It doesn't know what a finger
Oh
is.
my
That's
gosh!
the point.
You have to look up. There's a pattern of people on YouTube giving the finger to their cat, and the cat pounces. I think though you have to look aggressive when you do it, because and you have to do it to a cat. There's some cats that you can play with aggressively, like a cat would play with another cat, and they'll be gentle with you because they know that you don't have a cat's thick furry skin, and they have seen you bleed when they get out the murder mittens. But in any case, they will jump and grab and bite and everything, and so it's kind of funny. But no, I don't even commit to that with a pet. Like, I've had pets. I had pet rats when I was a kid because I was allergic to everything else. And if somebody brings up fish, no, I wasn't allergic to fish, but I was allergic to the mildew that having a fish tank in your house would put in your house. So there was that problem. We discovered that, and then we had to get rid of the fish, which sucked because they were pretty. They looked yummy though. That's the problem, is once you have carved up a fish yourself and cooked it, fish it out of the lake, carve it up, cook it, and eat it. Every fish looks like, I could eat that. Yeah, it's only 2 inches long, but I could still eat it. It's really bad. But yeah, now no, I don't have a pet, but there are some cats in the neighborhood that don't have homes, that we feed. And we've been systematically going through and getting them their shots and stuff through Siska, just because we don't want rabid animals, and we don't want an overabundance of kittens either. So some of them we've been able to get them neutered, but they're not pets, and most of them won't let you approach and pet them and cuddle them like normal cats, but they will talk to you. So I come home from work, and 3 cats will usually approach me. Meow, meow, meow. And I'll have conversations. My neighbors look at me like I'm nuts. The cat's meow, and I'm like, oh, you don't say. Are you sure about that? And one guy will let us pet him. And he hangs around on our porch, and he won't leave. He actually has declared it his territory, and he won't let the other cats come up there. And so he's the closest thing that I've had to a pet in probably 10 years, 12 years. And I'm quite comfortable with that. If we think there's going to be a tornado, he comes inside. Right? Aside from that, I don't have to deal with cat hair in the house. And I don't have to deal with having to increase my allergy medicine so I can have a cat in the house. Because I am allergic to him and all the other cats. So, I don't know. I guess I'm just not that social. Like, I can talk to all of you. I can talk to hundreds of people online, knowing it's going to go out to an audience later that is in thousands. But I don't hang out. I don't relax. It's just not how it's just not how I am. I even like I said, I've been playing Neverwinter. If I do team up with somebody to go do, there's different things that you can do in the game by yourself, and there's different things that you have to be with a group of people for. My microphone is usually turned off. Like, I don't talk, unless somebody asks me a question.
Yeah, I that's how I go through my day, like at work and everything. I prefer to just stay to myself. I don't like to bother people. I think it's just how I am normally. Like, if where I park far away, so I'm not in the way of other people. I don't try to be first.
Yeah, I park far away because I'm trying to lose weight. I'm going to be 100% honest. That's the only reason that I park a distance away from where I'm, because it's extra steps.
Yeah, but I through work I encounter these people who I don't know if they know what it's like to let 15 minutes pass without noise coming from their fucking face.
Are they female?
You know? No, these are
Oh,
men.
okay. I was gonna say, if they're female, the answer is they don't. They don't know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But you know, it's just it's odd seeing, because it is a female behavior. It's a female trait. It's odd seeing it in grown men. I mean, it shouldn't be, you know, surprising.
Well, now, are they talking about fantasy football?
No.
Okay.
No.
Because like that seems to be, I've noticed that can get a conversation. You start hearing about stats and stuff, and if you get a group of guys where like 3 or more of them are really into it, it's a lot like it's gaming, but it's a different type of gaming. They're essentially, so they'll do that, and I'll see them, like guys will talk about subjects that they're emotionally invested in because they can sort of bet and win, or they can achieve something. They get a result from it. I noticed women will just sit around and talk without a purpose. Like men, most of the time when they sit around and talk, if you take the time to listen, like for a long time, to what the conversation's about and how there's a purpose. And I'm not, like, small talk has a purpose, right? People connect with each other over small talk, and they keep up with, this is the condition my coworker is in right now, and it helps manage their expectations for the day, and stuff like that. And it helps people help each other through circumstances that are rough or challenging. But women will talk when there's not really a purpose for what they're talking about.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like, I totally understand the difference between the two, you know, and the value in men even having that space where they can just shoot the shit and not have to worry about someone, you know, overhearing the wrong thing at the wrong time. I can't even begin to tell. I work with nothing but men, mostly nothing but women or men, and a couple of annoying women who really like attention. So, you know, I see that, you know, I see the camaraderie, I see the conversations that they have, and it's a lot of small chit chat, it's a lot of nothing conversations, but that's not even what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I'm talking about people that just, I'm gonna yawn 10 times louder than I need to because I can make noise and I want you to hear it. You know,
you should hear me when I sneeze.
No, I'm one of those too. Trust me. And I work in a building that is large, so the sound travels very well.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I'm used to. We burp, we do all that shit. You know what I mean? But I mean, just the useless. I don't even know how to really explain it because I don't understand it. You know,
yeah, that makes sense. You gotta have some understanding of something to explain it.
Yeah, it's just like this need to make your presence known for some reason. I don't know.
It sounds like they're blowing off steam. Like, you get a level of tension built up in the air. I sometimes will do this. I'll have a sigh that is pretty vocal. And it's just, I'll take a deep breath and, gosh dang it, talking about it makes me yawn. I have this vocal sigh, and then I'm like, I wonder why I vocalized with that. It's not like anything's going on. I'm just doing, I'm just typing. Working on this thing. Like, I'm trying to compile. So we've been talking about this history of suffrage and its association with military service and taxation for a few months now. And I'm trying to compile some of the information into either one long video or a series of shorter videos. And I think I'm going to go for a series of shorter videos, because if I do one long video, it's going to be like 4 hours. or longer. But because we've probably got at least 30 hours of discussion in about this so far, and there will be more, right? But in any case, like I'll be sitting and working on that, and I'll stay in the same position. I'll be, going back and forth between tabs and all this stuff, and all of a sudden, it's like when you're petting a cat, and all of a sudden the cat's done. There's a certain degree of tension that happens that you just have to release it.
Yeah. And
if you're in an environment where you can't, you have to be careful what you do, because some of the stuff in the environment's dangerous, or, in my situation, there isn't a lot to do to release that tension. Like, I'm in somebody else's house, so that's it. I just and then I'm like, why did I make that noise? Oh well, it's tension release. But that might be what's going on. It's the only explanation I can think of.
I mean, tension release could be it, but I don't know. Pounding on the wall as you walk past seems
that's stimming.
Tad unnecessary.
Yeah. That's autistic stimming. It might not be autistic, but I mean, normal people stim too. Like, normies stim, but if you're autistic, you do it a lot more.
Yeah, well.
So,
he must be on the fucking spectrum, because.
Yeah, it's possible. It's quite possible. And it's actually people with ADHD stim too, and they do it a lot more. They just don't realize it because they forget 2 seconds later.
Yeah.
But
like it's when it's disturbing, when it's disturbing to the work environment, that's a different thing.
Yeah.
You
Shaman King wants to know what stimming is. So stimming is, have you ever, like, you're trying to think about something and you're focused on it, and it's a little stressful trying to get to the conclusion that you're trying to draw, and maybe you rub your chin with your fingertips, or you find yourself scratching your ear, or you're in a conversation with somebody that makes you nervous and you discover that you're playing with your fingertips or folding your hands together, cracking your knuckles, or that's stimming. It's basically a form of tension release using physical motions and physical touch and stuff that as I'm trying to describe this without notes that help me be accurate and clinical sounding, I'm tapping my fingertips together because nerves. But yeah, Gin Bottle says, I have what they call paralalia, repeating what I just said aloud in a whisper to myself. It's related to echolalia, which is basically just repeating what you said, right? Or repeating what other people said. The thing with the cats that talk about, the cats will say meow and I'll say you don't say. I do that because if I don't, I feel compelled to meow back at them. Like, the cat says meow and I'm like meow. Like, it's just and I will repeat stuff. I'll say the same thing. When I write an article, it's really bad. I'll write the article, and then I'll read the article, and then I'll realize it sounds like the article was written by Mojo Jojo from shit, I can't think of the cartoon. Oh,
I know Mojo.
The Powerpuff Girls.
Yes.
Mojo Jojo, would say the same thing over and over again, but he'd say it a bunch of different ways in a row. And I do that all the time. Right? That's just, and it's not that I can't help it, it's that it happens when I'm not putting effort into not doing it. And you guys hear me all the time throwing my adverbs, superfluous adverbs in. Basically, actually, seriously, literally, like, that's another one. So, no, I do not have a cat suit. I have a leotard. I don't think it fits anymore. I bought it 20 years ago, so it probably doesn't. But I don't have a cat suit. So I do, however, have more article to read. In any case, yeah, so away from the discussion of like autism versus normalcy, yeah, I would say, you know, we have our quirks and we have our hurdles, but the thing that narcissists do that autists don't, and vice versa, you know, that makes it important in that decision is if you give an autist a job to do and you ask them to focus on a particular thing and get it solved, get it sorted, they will latch on to that like a pit bull and never let go until it is done. And if you give that same task to a narcissist, they will make it about themselves. They will whine and complain. They will blame you for everything that goes wrong with it. And if they don't get it done, they will have every excuse in the book for why they couldn't. And it'll be your fault. And they'll gaslight you over it. But in any case, before I get into the article, I'm going to go back through. I have some super chows and some Rumble rants. So Richard Bier gave us $5 and said, seeing the reeing over the criticism toward Kamala. Yeah, I've seen some of that. I wonder just who will say, how dare you talk to or about a woman in such a manner when some foreign government official doesn't properly kowtow to her or kiss her ring to her satisfaction, and what other ramifications will result from any perceived slight by her. Oh yeah, wait until she goes to a country where they don't think women should be involved in politics. She will have to establish her masculinity real quick. Richard,
it's worth pointing out that we were within an inch of a timeline in which the next election would be between Nikki Haley and Kamala Harris.
Oh.
And I know that sounds awful, but that we were this close.
Yeah, you're right.
Timeline. And unless we show vigilance, we're going to get to that timeline at one point where it's two women running for office, and everyone's celebrating, going, "Whatever happens, we're going to get the first ever female president, and then everything's going to be."
Oh, you don't understand women. You do not understand women. If it was a conservative woman against a liberal woman, the conservative woman would become the man of the two women. I guarantee you. Yeah. Women in general, and then from the perspective of conservative women, the liberal woman would become the bad boy of the two women. So each woman would experience what women do when they hate another woman. It would be all-out war. There would be no celebration from the opposing side that we had gotten the first woman in office. There would be, she doesn't represent women. We are embarrassed by her. She is horrible. How dare you inflict this woman on our history? It would be hell. It would be absolute hell.
A lot of this was predicted by Gerald Ford, of all people. In, I think it was 1989. There's a clip that's surfacing now, and someone asked him about the possibility of the first ever female president, and he said, like, when it happens, it will be because the president is male and the vice president is female, and then that president is going to die, and the female vice president will become president.
Yeah.
And then you're all fucked. I mean, words to that effect. That's kind of what Gerald Ford said. He said, once that happens, once a woman gets in by default, everything's going to change.
Yeah.
He didn't elaborate much on what he meant by that, but I think what he meant was, once that happens, it's wall to wall, back to back female presidents until the collapse of the empire.
Yeah. We're in big trouble, really. But I don't know what's gonna happen either, because there's a lot of us that don't have any trust for what the outcome is going to be. We don't have any trust that the system is organic, and we don't have any trust that what we see happening in front of us is going to be unmanipulated and real. And that's a bad place for the country to be in. And the people that oppose our doubts have done nothing to assuage them. We've had no reassurance. We've had shame on you for worrying, shame on you for thinking that way. We haven't had, here's solid, irrefutable evidence that you're wrong and you don't have anything to worry about. And that's disturbing. Right? It doesn't matter if we're right or wrong. That is disturbing. That should never happen. Anyway, Richard Beer gave us another $5 and said, look what happened in Australia, where all of the women took a solidarity day off of work at the public transport railway company, and what happened some days later when 37 male train drivers didn't show up for work for a single day, and how long it took to return to normal afterward. I would love to see some news stories about that. I'm going to have to look into that now, because that sounds like an interesting incident that I didn't hear about. But I know that if the Union for Electrical Workers, electricians and people who work with electrical equipment that maybe aren't certified electricians but work in, peripheral jobs to that, if they took a day off, the whole country would be fucked. And it wouldn't even matter what type of power plant it was, whether it was the old-fashioned coal plants and stuff like that, or whether it was solar, whether it was wind turbines. It wouldn't matter. You still need electricians. You still need the people that do the direct work with the machines and do all of the calculations and do all of the making sure the gauges are right and nothing is going wrong. And if you don't have those people and something goes wrong in one place, it can really screw up a shitload of things. Richard Beer gave us $5 more and said, I forgot to mention the feminist snow plowing priority scheme in Sweden and how well it worked. It worked out to prioritize the residential areas and schools and daycare facilities to be cleared before the major thoroughfares became... Getting children to the daycare was so important when the entire city is paralyzed from being snowed shut. Yeah, what are you going to do? You take your kids to daycare and then you, go to work? Well, you can't do that because the main thoroughfares are still snowed over. That is really stupid. They did that, huh? Wow. Wow. So then we had in Rumble, OIC and Wowie gave us $1 and said, Kamala is a succubus. She consumes a certain amount or certain output from powerful men, and she grows more powerful. Then grows more powerful. And then OIC and Wowie gave us another $1 and said, I sadly find myself talking like Mojo Jojo when I have to refer to multiple concepts that are ambiguous in specific context. Yeah, I can see that. I hate it because no one speaks clearly and I can't understand them. Yeah, I could go off for an hour about that, actually. Just the fact that if I'm in a conversation, this is one of the reasons why I do lousy in person, right? If I say exactly what I mean about something, people try to figure it out or paraphrase it and they're inaccurate, and then they react to something I didn't mean and didn't say, and it starts an argument. Right? If I say, if you leave the door open, the cat will come in. Well, I didn't say I was letting the cat in. Well, I didn't say you were letting the cat in either. But if you leave the door open, he'll come in. That's just what he does. It's not about you, and it's not about the intent. It's about the cat's behavior. Like, didn't accuse you of anything, but you have to be careful. If you leave the door open, the cat will come in. Like, that conversation should have taken 2 sentences. If you leave the door open, the cat will come in. Okay, I'll watch out for that. Like, that's all it takes, right? That kind of conversation happens at my workplace all the time, where, I will say, the dishwasher doesn't get the dishes clean unless it has soap in it, which nobody should have to actually be told, but millennials and Zoomers don't know that. And somebody will be like, I got the dishes clean. I'm not a bad worker. I'm not... You're like, I didn't say that. And we're like, you absolutely, have to have a soap packet in the dishwasher when you start it. You did the job, but it doesn't get all the dishes clean if the soap packet isn't in there. So you just have to look and see if there's one in there. And half the time there is. But that conversation shouldn't need to happen. It should just, the dishwasher won't get the dishes clean if I don't make sure there's a soap packet in there. Okay, I'll double check. Duh. Right? It seems easy to me. Like, it seems like really easy to me to have those conversations. But until I talk to other people. And then as soon as I talk to other people, that vanishes and everything becomes intensely complex. And it's worse when I take things that people say to mean what the words that they have uttered mean. Like, that, all hell breaks loose when I do that. So, yeah. That's one of the reasons that my... it was my colleagues, actually, that were like, you need to talk to your doctor about possibly being autistic. That was how I figured it out. But anyway, so let's see, that is all of our super chats, and I think that is all of our super chows. So I will get back to the article for a minute. We were at, the 96% figures, so we'll go through another paragraph here, and then it'll be 9 o'clock, and I'm going to call it. Susan B. Anthony opposed letting women in Washington state vote on the suffrage question in 1871, claiming that women's condition of servitude made them unable to see the issue clearly. So what did she say there? Women are too dumb to decide whether or not women want the vote. Literally, women are too dumb to decide whether or not women should have the right to make decisions. Big decisions. Who should be running the country? Who should be deciding who gets drafted and who doesn't? Women can make those decisions, but they can't make the decision whether or not they should make those decisions. Can somebody explain to me the logic of that?
Stupid people cannot be trusted to make their own decisions. That's.
But they can be trusted to make everybody else's.
That sentiment has dominated a great deal of politics over the last few centuries. And no one ever really delineates the difference between stupidity and intelligence. They've tried with things like IQ, but as we've discovered quite recently, people with mid IQs are actually more susceptible to total bullshit than people on the left. You all will have seen the meme of the bell curve. The people in the middle are the people who fall for the propaganda far more than the idiots or the geniuses. For all our talk of supporting the middle class, when it comes to intelligence, the last people you should be supporting are the middle class. We call them midwits because there is this sort of connection. There's people who don't understand what words mean. Those are the idiots. There's people who think words mean everything. Like if we say this word means that, then that's all it can possibly mean, and that's the end of the story. And then there's high IQ people who are like, no, a word doesn't create reality. A word just reflects reality. That's supposed to be the point. We should argue the case of what is and is not real, and we doing our best with the words we have available, without ever saying, no, this must mean that because this word is that. And I imagine this is how the whole suffragette system took place. It was midwits who've decided what words mean, telling stupid people what words mean, and I guess it worked for the most part. Now, maybe that's because there's a certain difference in men and women. There's this certain mental blockage where you don't answer the question in terms of what is true. You answer the question in terms of what will make me popular. And it could be said that women fall for this more than men. Now, I know that sounds sexist and misogynist and what have you, but
it's true.
But it is arguably quite true. And I don't know how to elaborate it from there. Collectivism seems to be a trapping that affects women more, and individualism is a trapping that affects men more. Now, that doesn't mean one is right and the other is wrong. Collectivism and individualism are both important when it comes to not just human society, but the individual human spirit itself. And I don't know, I guess maybe the reason we've been drawn into such collectivist insanity is connected to how gynocentric society has become over the last 100 years. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just a crazy MRA on the internet.
Well, I think part of the problem is men will evaluate information and decide what they think of something, and they will adjust their feelings accordingly. Women will look around them at how everyone else is reacting, and they will decide how they feel about something, and they will adjust their thoughts on the subject accordingly. And what you end up with then is that men will trust their conclusions about something, and even if they feel at risk, if their knowledge tells them this is going to work, they will go forward with it. But women, even when their knowledge tells them, when the real facts in front of them tell them that something is safe, if they don't feel safe, they won't go forward with it. And even when the information in front of them tells them something is not safe, if they feel safe, they will go forward with it. And so you have this situation where men will vote for politicians whose platforms indicate a tendency to give men control over their destiny, right? And they'll vote for men who intend to improve the country in ways, or protect the country in ways that will allow the men in the country to just live their lives and do their thing and take charge of themselves. Women will vote for men or women who promise them safety nets, who promise them collective, defense, collective approval, a sense of safety. They would rather feel safe than be safe. And they will vote for people who will make them feel safe, even when they know damn well those people are not going to make them be safe. And that screws everything up. And what that does is it results in an increase in bureaucratic power over time. Because the best way to promise women safety is to promise them that the thing that they're afraid of is going to be handled by someone else and they don't have to worry about it. Whereas with men, the best way to promise men safety is to promise them that you're not going to get in their way when they try to protect themselves and fix the problems that they face in their lives. Right? So you end up with more and more departments and agencies dedicated to specific, oddly specific things in government. And you end up with more and more comedians making jokes about oddly specific departments and agencies like the Ministry of Silly Walks, right? That have no real purpose, but in reality, those types of ministries and those types of departments and agencies are designed to get politicians elected by making women feel safer than they really are. And they'll do it at other people's expense too, which is why we have this oversized, overgrown, overzealous, and over-consuming welfare system that is draining the coffers and the future of the United States right now. But yeah, condition of servitude. The thing that struck me about this, though, is what Susan B. Anthony said here is that people who are too stupid to make their own personal decisions to decide whether or not they're qualified to do something, to decide whether or not something is in their interest, should have the right to decide what taxes you should pay, whether or not, the country should go to war, what regulations should be placed on your interests and your devices, your land, your community, by voting. I called Kamala Harris a bimbo the other day, but this trumps that. This is some bimbo dipshit talk right here. Opposing women in voting on the suffrage question because they're not smart enough to decide whether or not they should have that power. But they're smart enough to have that power. It would be different if she was opposing women's voting rights and she said that. That would be consistent. But this is some bullshit. That referendum would have been a huge defeat for the suffragists. Sarah Josepha Hale, the editor of Godfrey's Ladies' Book and author of Mary Had a Little Lamb, wrote that for one woman who desires, there are 50 who disapprove. Suffrage leaders Anna Howard Shaw, and Ida Husted Harper, and Harriet Stanton Blatch objected to a proposed referendum in New York for New York women in 1910. When the anti-suffragist Minnie Bronson visited California in 1911, she proposed that women themselves should be allowed to decide suffrage question by vote. The suffragists declined the offer again. So they didn't want women's consent, and they didn't want women voting on whether or not women should have the vote. So even the suffragists thought women shouldn't vote when it was important to them what the outcome of the vote would be. How many times do I have to emphasize that? Are people not... that's huge information. We hear all the time about how sexist it is. Oh, women shouldn't vote. Oh, you're sexist. You're sexist. Why are you mad that women shouldn't vote? Well, you're only mad because you don't like that they're voting for something other than the outcome you want. But when it was women pushing for women to get the vote, the suffragists, I will repeat, the suffragists thought women shouldn't vote when the outcome of the vote was important to the suffragists. I don't think I could conclude on a better note than that. That pretty much encompasses the entire argument right there between the suffragists and the anti-suffragists. So with that, I'm going to read my last super chow, and then we will close out the show. Richard Beer gave us $5 and said the suffrage question is sounding like an elitist plot to stuff ballot boxes by having voters function the same way as shares of stock in a publicly traded company. Bingo! You win the prize. The voting shares are 1 vote per share and not per shareholder, so someone can fill out ballots by proxy for the registered voters instead of each voter filling the ballot themselves. It begins to look rather dystopian. After all, why is there so much opposition to voter identification or verification that the actual registered voter is the one filling out their own ballot with a traceable chain of custody and no unobserved middle people or unguarded ballot storage locations? Excellent comment. And that's just it. The less documented voting is. Even if you don't know, even if you can't publicly document that person A voted for candidate B, you can document that this ballot between when it was cast and when it was counted was known to be person A's ballot, signed by and filled out by person A until it was counted, and then we don't reveal who it was for, who voted for whom to the public, and still have the secret ballot. But voting was a lot more secure, honestly, when you had to go up on a stage and hold up a card that said who you were voting for and everybody could see. Even though people could be pressured to change their vote based on popular opinion, you at least knew that when the authorities said, this many people voted for this, that it was true. So, with that, I'll thank my 2 co-hosts for sticking out the long and wandering sausage with me. Thanks to everybody for listening, both to the regular subject matter and the autist conversation. And thanks to everybody who works in the background to make HBR Talk happen.
Everything is an autist conversation.
That's true. That's true. I guess that makes me a professional autist.
We are all professional autists.
Well, it's just one letter off from what I once thought I wanted to be.
In my accent, it's much the same. Artist. Maybe the coincidence is not a coincidence, eh?
Yep, there we go. That's funny because I hang out with a community of artists, actually 2 community of artists, and in both communities, some of the most talented artists are at opposite ends of the spectrum from each other. They're either autistic or they have severe attention deficit disorder. But in any case, thanks everybody for listening. And again, thanks to everybody who works in the background to make HBR Talk happen. Good night, all.
See you next Thursday.
See you next Thursday. And we will also, I think Brian's back on Tuesday, so we will also see you Tuesday.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.